Bernie, are you on a work site? Yes, he is. Look at this. If you guys don't know Bernie, he just closed his first deal, right? I don't think I can hear you, but he's actively violating OSHA regulations by
Hey, how you doing? I'm supposed to have my hard hat on also, but I took it off. It's too hot. I need to create some shade wherever I can.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna go back to the screen share. Just had to give you.
I'm going to be listening, so I'm going to turn.
I'm going to turn the volume off on here, so I'm not going to see you. So, you can text somebody, okay, Amy or something, if you need my attention. But I'm not going to be following the chat. So, what else did I need to send this link? So, participants. Okay. Don't like that. Yes, I can zoom. Cool. Here, Amy, do you want one of these? Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna get started then, since it's recorded. So, I already told you guys this, but I'll say it again for Zoom. This document that we're looking at here, this is the standard New Jersey contract of sale, right? And I took the time to go through this document, which we use to close every deal we do in New Jersey, and highlight what's important, mark some things up, make some notes. I give this to anybody who wants it, so you're welcome to email me if you don't have you want a PDF copy of it. I gotta let these people come in. All right, so again, this is my marked up standard New Jersey contract of sale. As a matter of business practice, I actually have another version of this with like just a little bit less stuff highlighted, and we'll go a little bit more in depth on some things, and I give it to every client at the onset. And I don't expect them to read it because nobody does, but at least now when we get an accepted offer in a market that's moving as fast as this, sometimes at least I can say, well, I gave you that document. It's going to be exactly the same when we get to, when we actually get to contracts. So I do find that it is helpful to do that because I can't stress it enough. This is the most important document, the single most important document that we work with. And I recommend you read it before you go to bed every night or when you wake up in the morning until you can tell me what's paragraph 16 is. Like that's the inspection contingency. If you want to know, hey, when's the deposit due? Get that question a lot. When's it due? It's in the contract. When is the mortgage commitment due? What is that? It's in the contract. When are the inspections due? It's in the contract. So it is our Bible, I guess, if you want to call it that. All right, so starting off here, page 1, I'm just going to go through this pretty slowly, page by page. If you have any questions, just stop me. I'd love for it to be an open dialogue. Amy, your experience, if you want to add anything or anything at all, really. So our first paragraph here, we're talking about who we represent, right? And some of this is going to be very basic and some of it's going to be very advanced because we're all at different stages here, but it's always good for a refresher, right? So we represent the one party in a transaction unless we are working with an agent, either ourselves or another agent that's from another office of which George Denny is the broker of record. So we have Morristown, Cherry Hill, Robbinsville, and that it? You know, I keep looking at you. I think Marlton might be dual agency, but I haven't run into it yet. So it's important to note that because it affects how we fill out the rest of this contract later. And you will get hit for it when you submit for compliance for sure. All right, so let's talk about attorney review real quick. So for new agents, attorney review is a lovely thing that our beautiful state of New Jersey has implemented to try and give both sides of the party a fair chance, a fair opportunity to hire an attorney to review this standard contract of sale. It is not something that can be waived. You cannot waive attorney review. Takes place 3 business days after each party signs this contract and receipt is confirmed. So everybody's confirmed that they've got the fully executed document in their hands. Attorney review begins the next business day and runs for 3 business days. So I'm going to give a couple examples of that. Let's say agreements are signed today. You get an accepted offer today, 9 o'clock this morning. Buyer sign it 10 o'clock this morning. Seller signs it at 10 o'clock at night today, sends it back to you, and you say, hey, listing agent, I got it. We're all good. That's at 11 o'clock tonight. Attorney review begins tomorrow, Thursday, runs through Friday, skips Saturday, skips Sunday, continues Monday. So Monday's your last day, and you're officially pending, and should be officially pending in Bright MLS on Tuesday of next week. So that's why it can be really important, because we don't want it to run over the weekend if we can avoid it. If there's anything that we can do to get contracts signed prior to, so that attorney review doesn't have to go over the weekend, it's great. So one question that I do see a lot with attorney review is what happens if you go under contract on Tuesday? Because Saturday is not a business day, but if you go under contract Tuesday, you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you are officially pending on Saturday, not Monday. So as long as you go under contract by Tuesday, you're not going to hit attorney review going through the weekend. So, make sense? Yeah.
So as far as attorney review ending, does it end at 5 o'clock or does it end at 12 o'clock?
I've always been taught it ends at 12 o'clock midnight.
Okay.
Always been taught. There's a lot of people that will argue that to the tooth and nail, but every attorney that I've been on these calls with has said midnight. 3 business days, yet it ends at midnight. So I think people just get tripped up because it's business days. So they think that means 9 to 5. Well, how do you who determined that business day is 9 to 5? It just means that the reason why it's business days is because what I've been taught is because you're just counting working days. You're not going to count July 4th as a working day. You're not going to count Memorial Day or Saturday or Sunday as working days. So I almost feel like that'd be a better way to describe it.
It's only pending in the MLS after attorney review. You just leave it active in the
This is a great question. So let's talk about this. So lots of things agents do. What I'm talking about, what I'm teaching here is what's right, the way to do it, right? The right way to do it is you get fully signed contracts today. If they are fully signed, whether you have the deposit or not, that property should go A/C in Bright tomorrow. And I am advocating for my agents in coaching to make sure that other agent, make sure that listing agent changes the status. I do not want to see it be active for 4 days, or if you go under contract today, a lot of agents will leave that active until God knows when, and they'll continue to show it. They might not even know they're getting showings on it. Then they get another offer, and what happens? Now you're back to square one. So, a lot of what I talk about when talking about the contract, I've learned, some agents or some of the things here, other agents can get a little annoyed at you, but who do you represent? You represent your client. You do not represent the other agent at Keller Williams or at Weicker. You represent your client. So fight for them and get that property changed in Bright the next morning. As a matter of making our offers, I put in every offer. Once the buyer has signed the contract and the deposit has been received, the property is to be changed to pending in the MLS. Is that right? No. Is that how it's supposed to be done? No. But do listing agents do it sometimes? Yes. So I'm not going to complain if we sign this contract today and the listing agent changes it to pending right now. That makes the buyer and me feel much better that we're not going to lose this to a new showing that's going to happen, because no agent is going to try and show a property that's legitimate pending in Bright.
So what's the status that you're supposed to be?
So you can, when you have a listing and you go in Bright, you can edit and add contract of sale information, and there is an option for a contingency being attorney review, but the way that it appears in Bright is A/C. So anytime you see a property that's A/C, that should mean that there's some type of contingency going, and they may or may not still be showing the property at that point. So if it's attorney review, in theory, they can show the property and hold a backup offer, but if that offer is more compelling than yours, the seller may very well cancel this contract that we have right here and take the other offer.
And that's why pending is so much more.
It's so much more secure. Sometimes, we have to use our judgment, right? If you represent the seller, it's in the seller's best interest to leave it active as long as you can and take those offers and have those showings, because what happens if the buyer gets cold feet 2 days into attorney review? Yep. So it's all about who you represent, right? All right, so page 2, it does this. I remember it doing this before, so I'm just going to have to deal with the way that this appears on the screen here. All right, so section 3 here, page 2, who is holding the deposit on every deal now? Even when you're making offers, we're saying, title company, please hold the deposit, right? It's becoming more common. 2 years ago, it wasn't common. After COVID, now it's super common. Very, very rarely does a listing broker want to hold escrow. Historically, by default, if you don't fill anything in here, the listing broker is historically has been the one that will hold the escrow, right? Makes sense? So we like to say the title company. A lot of people will actually just write in this section right here, buyer's title company, because maybe they haven't decided who's going to hold who the title company is going to be. I've never had anybody make an issue on that. I've never had a lender make an issue with it not saying a real company there. So I think that that's a fine way to do it. And it's smart to have the title company hold the deposit because it's one less thing you have to worry about. It's one less thing on your agenda to make sure that it's brought to closing. Leave it on the title company. They're the ones that handle the checks at settlement anyway. So it's a lot easier to just do it that way. You know, more and more brokers now don't want to get a deposit. You know, we see it all the time now. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's actually probably, yeah, it is. Yeah, so you just walk into the front desk of the title company or send it in the mail, get a picture of your certified mail receipt, send it to the title company, and they will handle getting it into escrow. So what else is there to talk about with that? I don't really think anything. One thing that I'll say, which applies to a lot of things, not just this, is we do it weirdly in New Jersey when we use the, you pass it back to the we use the proposal to purchase in New Jersey. That's not normal. Most states use this contract. This is your proposal. Fill it out, have the buyer sign it, send it over. That's a proposal. In Pennsylvania, 10 minutes away, that's how it's done on every deal. And I do like to explain that in Pennsylvania, if this contract, you send an offer over with the buyer's signatures on it, oftentimes you're sending it over with a copy of an escrow check as well. And as soon as that seller signs it, it's done. You are pending. That seller cannot take another offer and your buyer cannot back out. Wouldn't it be nice? So that's how we did business here. But it's not. So we have the 3-day attorney review period, which makes us be a little bit looser with our proposal, right? Because really this contract isn't fully binding until after the 3-day attorney review period expires. So when we're making our offers, I like to make sure that we've got anything that can be changed in the contract of sale. For example, who's holding the escrow? How much is it going to be for a CO? How much is the limit for a CO repair? We'll talk about that as well. I want to make sure we're putting that in our offer so there's no discrepancy when the listing agent fills out the contract of sale, right? You know, just taking a step back, when we make offers here in New Jersey, the buyer's agent typically is making the offer on behalf of their buyer, and then the listing agent is preparing the contract of sale, right? Well, there's a lot more information held within the contract than there was in your offer. So what I hate seeing is when you make an offer and you tell your client, got an accepted offer, listing agents preparing contracts, they send the contracts over to you and there's 7 things they added to the contract. Or for example, Weicker adds a whole paragraph and additional contract provisions. We want to make sure we're trying to give as clear cut as we can in our proposal, if we're using a proposal, or you can just use a contract as your offer. So pros and cons either way. But all right, so mortgage information, pretty self-explanatory, right? You're putting in the amount they're getting for their mortgage, the type of the mortgage, right? Whether it's a 15 or 30 year. This date is important, really important, right? And it's often overlooked as being important. People kind of gloss over the mortgage commitment date. What is a mortgage commitment date? Well, what I've been taught by attorneys in these classes is basically that when a mortgage commitment is issued, the mortgage contingency is satisfied. When a mortgage commitment is issued, the mortgage contingency of the contract is satisfied. What does that mean? If the buyer goes and buys a new car after the mortgage commitment is issued, they'll be in breach if they can no longer qualify for their mortgage. If they did it before the mortgage commitment, the lender could very easily get them out of it because the commitment has not been issued yet and their debt to income ratio changed and they no longer will qualify for the loan amount. So it's important that we put a date in here. If we leave it blank, it's within 30 calendar days after attorney review is completed. In my opinion, that should be shrunken up because who's doing a deal right now that's closing in 40 days? Almost all of our conventional deals, at least, are closing in 30 or even a little bit quicker if we can do it. So if you leave this blank, which a lot of agents do, your mortgage commitment is due after you close. That doesn't make any sense. You want it to be due before you close. So you want to make sure that you're looking at your closing date here and saying, before closing on June 30th, and that's 30 days, let's put in June 23rd here as our mortgage commitment due date, just a little bit before you're actually supposed to close. Does that make sense? Mortgage commitment's a big deal because if you read it further here, right here, if the buyer has not obtained the commitment, then either the buyer or the seller may void this contract by written notice to the other party within 10 days of the commitment date. So I think people overlook this a lot. if you have a seller that has cold feet after they go under contract, this could be an out for them. And a lot of agents aren't on their lenders. A lot of lenders don't even issue the commitment on the due date. It's very important that this date goes in your calendar and a commitment is issued on or before that date, so the seller doesn't have a chance to try and walk away from the deal. All right, and this is the closing date. Self-explanatory. Sorry, I'm obviously having a hard time here with this. Let's talk about inclusions really quick, if I can stop with the. Here we go, sorry about this. I'm gonna do continuous scroll. Here we go.
If both parties want to go forward and you're going to go over the mortgage commitment, as long as they go.
No problem. Yeah, no
pay,
problem.
right?
No problem. Yep. Anything in this contract can be changed at a later date. You know, even if it's, James, if you want a copy of this document, you can grab it. So let's go over number 6, items included in sale. I like to talk about this a little bit. So what is included by default? The default contract language basically says anything that's bolted to the wall is included. The light fixtures included. The stove, dishwasher, microwave that's mounted, all included. Is a pool table included by default? No, it's not. However, some buyers, sellers, listing agents, or buyer's agents might not realize that because it's huge. And what happens when you show up to a final walkthrough and one of two things happens? The buyer wanted the pool table and it's gone, or the buyer didn't want the pool table and it's still there. Now you're calling a couple friends to come and help you bring a pool table out of a house. So in my opinion, it's better to put these big things like pool tables, jacuzzis on included or excluded, even though it's covered by default language.
How about center kitchen items that are not attached?
Excluded by default. Got to be mounted. Excluded by default. That's a great one. That's another one. Anything that you could question even a little bit, put it in here. I've seen agents write contracts and they're putting the model number of the fridge in here. Go for it, because the contract doesn't say what refrigerator is included. It just says a refrigerator. What stove is included? It just says a stove. So if you have a $5,000 Viking stove and you show up and there's a Frigidaire there, discounted from Walmart, what do you have to say that that was not permitted by contract language, right? So just try and avoid, you know, any issue that you can, right? It's makes it easier this way. Shed is included. Yeah, I actually don't know what would be considered like standard language with that. Maybe it wouldn't be included, but I've always put that language for a shed in inclusions, or, you know, if you're not going to include it, then put it in exclusions. But a shed is something that's typically can't be moved, right? You know, once it's built on the spot, you can't just go and pick it up and move it. So I think that'd be a questionable one, and I'd put it under inclusion. So if anybody knows the actual answer to that, I'd love to hear it. Christine, you have to be careful because if an agent reports you, Bright will call you out and ask for backup. I would love to know what you're talking about, Christine. Probably about changing the status. For pending status, can you talk or no? I turn my volume up.
Maybe, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, that was from a while ago. So when we changed it to active with a contingency because of attorney review, and lately it's been happening a lot because they're following so closely, another agent will call you out and to Bright, and then they want proof. And you can't get proof because it's not pending.
They want proof that you're in attorney review, or that you're out of attorney review.
That you're out of attorney review and you've changed it to pending.
So what you're saying is, right, the try to get them to change it to pending, if an agent calls you out for it, Bright's going to come after you and ask for proof that you're out of attorney review.
Right.
Yeah.
Only if an agent reports you, but they seem to be lately.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, all the time. But agents are getting really frustrated because how many times do we go to show a listing and here it's been under contract for a week, and even agents are texting the agent, is it still available? Is it still available? I'm here. Is it still available? I showed it. I want to make an offer pending. Like, it's just frustrating. So.
And as far can I make a comment about your inclusions?
Yeah.
You want to make sure for personal property, they want to make sure that they don't put that in the contract, because then the lender calls it out. That should be like.
That's a great point. So Christine's saying, don't put like personal property, like what could we use as an example?
The living room.
The living room, the dining set. Don't put it as an inclusion. Here's the thing though. I've had deals, Christine, where the lenders haven't called that out.
I agree. So have I, but.
So. And that's what so one thing to talk about too, we could just talk about it now, is a lot of stuff like that. So that's usually how I would do it. If the seller is planning on leaving a dining room set or a couch or something like that, I will skip it in the inclusions, and we'll put that kind of stuff in a blank contract amendment, and we'll not send it to the lender. There's lots of stuff that you can put in a blanket amendment outside of the contract and then just not send that to the lender, so it doesn't raise a red flag. For example, I have a deal right now where the sellers actually specifically excluded the stove in the kitchen. So we didn't put that in excluded. We didn't specifically exclude it. The reason for that is we don't want the lender to call it out and have the appraiser be like, well, what stove is coming and where, and we have to come back in and see the stove and make sure it works before we close. So we're gonna put stove is excluded in a blank amendment, and they're putting a new stove in before closing. But they have, like I just said, they have a nice stove, and they wanna put in like a generic GE stove. Buyers don't care, it's gonna be brand new. I think it's weird too that they're trying to take their stove, but whatever, that'll get the deal done. But we're putting that in a separate amendment or addendum that the lender won't see, right?
So you have a deal right now where the buyer wants the furniture.
Yeah.
And the sellers are fine with it. So should I do a separate agreement?
Yep, I would.
Say it would be
The what a lender or what underwriting for a loan for a mortgage company could say is you're putting monetary value on that, and they don't want that. When you include a couch or you include a TV or something like that, that's not, you know, bolted to the wall or whatever. You know, there's a thought that if you're paying $260 for that house, that includes the, you know, for a house that could include the cost of that house or the couch. I can't speak. So it's best practice is to put that stuff on a blank contract amendment. It operates the same way.
Is Christine saying after attorney review, we should go into update right and say?
You should make it pending as long as you're, yes, after attorney review is over, you can change it to bright or change it to pending and you're compliant. What Christine is saying is that, and because what I said earlier was in our offers, a lot of times we're saying, hey, once you have the deposit check and once the contract is fully signed, we want you to change it to pending right away. Just to see if we can get away with it, because 20% of the time we do, and the agent will change it to pending right away, just because it benefits the buyer. If I'm the listing agent, I would never do that. I would change it to attorney review the next day and then pending after it expires.
So I have a quick question. So if the seller decides to leave, like say a wait set or something.
Yeah.
Should you immediately get that put in just in case at the last minute when you move in?
Absolutely.
And then they said, I didn't tell you that?
Yes.
So should you write it up immediately so that?
I would
if
make.
they do change their mind, you say, no, you already said you would leave.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
That be legalized or just?
No, I would just put it in your offer and then make sure it's in the contract amendment, or at least have an email about it. Like just something that you could show up to final walkthrough and be like, look, I know we didn't have this in agreement for the stupid wait set, but it's here. So it's either not supposed to be here or it is. But I'll tell you, the only time I ever had a fist fight at a final walkthrough was because of a seller that left stuff that he wasn't supposed to. And I had the buyers and I told them a million times, I said, I have a feeling this guy's gonna leave this stuff because the other agent's out to lunch and he's gonna leave this stuff. So I show up to final walkthrough and sure enough, the seller was there, let the buyers in. The seller was like a very grumpy guy and I'm sure he was there because he knew he was doing something wrong. And the buyer and him got face to face. I had gotten my gallbladder out like 3 days before that. So I'm like trying to break up this fight. They're spitting on me because they're screaming at each other so loudly. And I said, that's it. Next time I'm not even gonna go in. I'm just gonna call the police and let them deal with it. That's not true. I would go in if it happened again.
Is there a personal property contract template?
There's actually not. We would typically just we have a blank contract amendment that just allows you a paragraph to type whatever you want. It's a dangerous little one-page document that we have and use all the time.
I actually use that for the deal that I have after talking to Frank, because the appraisal would have been damaged by the addition of the new septic. Even though it wasn't considered in the original appraisal and there's a new appraisal coming. So he, I pretty much asked for his advice, and he was like, just do it in, a separate document.
Right.
To mention that we're putting in a new septic.
Exactly.
The value of the home.
Yep. Good call for sure. And that's the benefit of working with a knowledgeable lender, right? And also Frank is gonna, if you send these documents to Frank and Frank sees something in here that shouldn't be, he'll call you before he sends it to underwriting. He'll call you and say, hey, change that because it could cause an issue later. Quicken Loans isn't gonna do that. you know, 1-800 Wells Fargo, they're not going to do that. They're just going to take it and they're going to give you, underwriting's going to have an issue with that 3 days before settlement. And now you're going to have to be walking, you know, everything back. So, yeah. So another thing, a lot of agents put in bright, included washer, dryer, refrigerator in as-is condition, right? They always say in as-is condition. Just beware of that. Just at least have that conversation with your buyers. You know, historically, going back years, I guess, right? Refrigerators weren't necessarily that common to be left in houses. They went from house to house. People took them with them. But nowadays, it's uncommon for there to not be a refrigerator because it's not worth the hassle now. Things break and they get replaced. So when agents do that, just make sure you're talking to your buyer because home inspectors don't typically inspect a refrigerator. And I have gotten these calls because I've made this mistake where we don't check the ice maker. We don't check the water dispenser at our home inspection. We get the final walkthrough, it's all cleaned out and the buyers have nothing else to do but to press the thing on the fridge and now the ice maker doesn't work. And it's like, oh. So just, you know, things to be aware of because I don't really like to buy refrigerators for my clients if I don't have to. See the chat.
Yeah, that wasn't mine, but it had a home warranty.
All right, so, all right, certificate of occupancy. I like talking about this one as well. This is a blank. I've seen, this didn't used to be a blank, right? Anybody remember the old contract? I don't know if any, like the old contract didn't have a blank here. It just said the seller has to get the CO basically up to any amount. It was undefined. So if the seller was selling their house in Collingswood, for example, Collingswood doesn't allow gravel driveways. So now that they don't know that, the listing agent doesn't know that, seller doesn't know that, they go to get the CO, they pay $50 application fee. They say, oh, I'm on my way to closing. And the township says, nope, you need to put in a concrete driveway here. That's going to be 10 grand. So it used to be undefined here, and that meant that the seller would be on the hook for anything. Christine Turner, remember. So what the contract says now is if the expense exceeds 1.5% of the purchase price, essentially the seller may terminate the contract because the CO expense was greater than 1.5% of the purchase price. And I want to dive into this a little bit because I think it's important. Nobody leaves this blank. Nobody leaves this blank. Almost every time an agent puts a number in there, it could be 1,500. That's my favorite number for it. It could be 500. It could be $250 I've seen. It could be $100 that I've seen. Where they're getting those wacky numbers, I don't know because the applications in most townships cost more than $100 or $250, right? So here's the thing. The reason I don't worry about it too much is because what I've learned from attorneys is that basically if the seller says, you know what, getting the CO is too expensive, I want to terminate the contract, here's your escrow back. That's not enough because it says that the seller must pay reasonable expenses to the buyer. What does reasonable expenses mean? Now they have to reimburse them for their home inspection, for their moving truck, for the breaking their rent fee that they charge, right? There's a number of different things that could go in buyer's reasonable expenses, which makes it hard for a seller to terminate the contract because they're not getting the CO. So I just wanted to make sure I point that out because it is something that some people get stuck on sometimes. They're like, wait, so if the CO costs more than $200, the seller can just walk away? Not really. They'd have to pay for everything that the buyer, and no buyer is going to want to come and buy the property now that they know that there's a new driveway that needs to be put in. They're going to want the driveway done beforehand, or they're going to negotiate $10,000 off the price to do it after the fact. Yeah.
Renee and I were just talking about this, and what about for a lot of these listings now, they say buyer responsible for
Yeah.
zero?
Yep.
What would you put there with 0?
So I would actually leave it and address it later.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that in a second. Go ahead, James.
If it's an active investment property with tenants living inside there, how you get to see?
Great question. So if it's an active investment property and tenants are living in the property, the landlord by New Jersey state law should be getting the property inspected every year. As long as it's under 5 units, I believe. It's got to be inspected every single year by the township, basically. They charge per unit. It's kind of a sham. They come in for 5 seconds and they leave. They check to make sure the smoke detectors are working, whatever else, and they leave, right? What usually happens is landlords aren't doing that. So then you go under contract to buy an investment property or a property where a tenant lives in, and those rental CO inspections are a lot tougher than resale CO inspections. Townships care a lot more about renters than homeowners when it comes to resale CO inspections, and I mean that. Collingswood is a great example. Their CO inspection used to be cracked concrete, smoke detectors. That's it. You had no windows on the house, totally fine. House is half broken down, they don't care. You have a tenant living in that property, it's a full-on home inspection. They're saying that's too close to the electrical thing, that this outlet's blocked, that this, and you need to paint that, and this needs to be done. And hey, are they charging you too much in rent? You need to lower the rent by 200. No, but seriously, it can be an ordeal. So you have to pay attention. If you have a tenant in there, it's definitely something to look into. So, okay, when the buyer has to pay, so typically default contract language, just to clear this up a little bit, seller pays for the CO. A couple of years ago, the only time buyers were paying for the COs were rehabbers, people who knew what they were doing, people who were used to doing that, right? They say, you know, it's a bank that owns it somewhere and the bank doesn't have the assets to send somebody out there to put up smoke detectors. So they say it's the buyer's responsibility to get the CO. Now that we're in this super competitive market and buyers are waiving every contingency they can, buyers are saying, I'll get the CO for the house. I'll go to the township. I'll pay for it. When they come out there and they say that you need to make 3 repairs, I'll take care of it after closing. I'll put it on the buyer, not the seller, to make your life a little bit easier. It's a crappy thing to have to be doing that right now, but it is common now. I don't know if it's going to become more common, but it happens. So the biggest thing to know for that is your buyer might say, well, I don't want to pay $10,000 for a driveway now. I'll do it after I close, but I don't want to do it before we close. So how do we get to closing if we don't have the new driveway? Well, most townships in New Jersey will issue a temporary CO, or what's called an Affidavit of Title. And that essentially says nobody can move into this property until such and such work is completed. And I, James Robinson, I sign off that I'm going to do that work before anybody moves in. Then you can close. You typically have a time frame on when you need to do the work, and then call the township to have them come out there and issue a clean CO. So for rehabbers, it's usually not an issue, right? Because if there's a big issue in the house, the rehabber's probably going to fix that during the renovations anyway. It's more of an issue for a house that's move-in ready, and you have buyers that they want to close and move in. You know, for example, actually, Giovanna Rivera has a listing that she's been dealing with this issue. She has a house that's move-in ready that had a pool that the concrete is covering too much of the yard, and there's a foundation issue, and there's a mildew smell in the attic. That's what the inspector wrote on the report from the township. There is a mildew smell in the attic. That is how he worded it and wrote it in the inspection report. So what does that mean, township inspector? Should we put some Febreze up there? Then it's got a Febreze smell. Can we close then? So you have to be careful when you're putting that liability on your buyer. You have to know what the township is expecting you to do in order to get a clean CO. All right. Absolutely. If it's something easy, you can get it done before closing. And one other note on this real quick is most townships require a fire cert that's separate from a CO. And when they require the fire cert, they will almost never let you close without it, which means that if your buyer's getting the CO, they also have to get the fire cert, and they just might be going over there and putting up smoke detectors from Home Depot. So I legitimate have a box in my basement. You probably have something similar. And I used to, when I worked with a lot of rehabbers, I would just drive over and I'd get the box from my basement. I'd put the numbers on the door and I'd put the smoke detectors up in the house, and then the fire marshal would come out, inspect it, and give us a clean fire cert. Then the second that they buy the house, they go in there and they rip it all down. So, all right, municipal assessments usually, has not. That would just be, if the seller had any knowledge of that. I'm not really going to get into that because it's not a super common thing, right? At least not right now with home prices increasing in value. Who knows? Maybe our towns will start assessing.
So if you're representing the buyer and you send in your offer on the contract, would you recommend that they click that or do not click that? Or leave that out? That's
such a great question, right? There's other stuff like that too. Cesspool, lead-based paint. When we send offers as a contract, we're making assumptions about the seller, and we're putting our liability on the line. I always say has not, if I'm being honest. I will always just put has not. I mean, unless there's some weird scenario, or if it was, I don't know, a condo or something and I wasn't sure, I'd be more nervous.
They will get it.
They will get it. They will get assessed, right?
So sometimes I'll recommend, if you're not sure if that's the type of situation, maybe let the seller know you did not fill out that area. When that's a great. Maybe fill that in.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. That's a good idea. I just wanted to, now that I'm seeing this down here. So one thing that I learned was this is important for our sellers. And I'd love to get some input on this. So while the seller can say, I'm not going to get the CO because I have to spend X amount of money making these repairs, well, one thing that is exempt from that or separate from that is local ordinances. And within local ordinances is permits. So I don't know if anybody's run into this. Actually, I know Giovanna's running into this at that same house. So what this means is seller has to close out any necessary permits that are needed for the property. And not all townships are checking for permits and not all buyers care. The biggest issue becomes with finished basements. So you have a finished basement that you don't have a permit for, and now like Cherry Hill is checking for permits for that. The current seller might have lived there since 2000, but the basement was finished in 1980. How are you going to get a permit on that? Whose fault is that? Well, the contract of sale says that no matter what the expense is, if the buyer says, nah, you got to get the permit. So if they have to rip open the walls and show the township inspector the rough electrical and how it was built, there is no limit on local ordinances, which would be permits. And you'll see in a lot of attorney addendums, right, that they'll put a limit on this.
That happened to be my house. So it's 26 years, they finished the basement.
Right.
But on the buyer, township put the original permit on this. Can't inspect it. You let the sale go, the closing go through, but I have to bring the basement to compliance.
Have to bring it to code, yeah. Yeah, it's a scary thing, right? It could cost you a ton of money and time. That's a big thing, time. Now you got to get permits. It's going to guarantee it's going to cost 3 weeks just to get your permit opened and get the inspector out there. Go ahead.
So when it comes to like the permits versus like taxes and everything, this buyers are, they're going to ask how much their month is going to be. And
Yes.
they're going to estimate on that. If there's permits that were from the city, but they haven't been completed, is there somewhere you can check to make sure that
You could pull an OPRA request from the township, which you'll generally do under contract. And at that point, you could say you need to close these permits out. I mean, what's the percentage of deals you do where buyers are pulling an OPRA request? You doing it on every deal?
A
Or?
little bit, no.
Either-
The attorneys, when they get involved, they suggest to do it every deal. And I'm not sure who should pull the OPRA request. Do you say you as the agent do it, or you have your buyer?
Buyer. I say buyer, but that's just because from actually it's Rothamel's class, just try and be out of it because you don't want to be on the hook for doing something wrong. Just like school districts, like don't tell your buyer to call the school district. Don't give them this information and then you're wrong after closing. Could be a big
And the
lawsuit type
OPRA
of thing.
stands for
Open permits, open public records is something.
Yeah,
Act,
so
yeah.
anybody can get them.
Anybody can get them, yep, at any time, but you typically do it under contract.
You tell the buyers that, we don't call.
Tell the buyer to do it. Yeah, I've done them. I mean, I've seen them and done them and been involved in it, and it's can be a little bit of a pain, but it is what it is. The argument is, hey, look at Mr. or Mrs. Buyer. I know you're happy to buy this house. What's the thing you love most about this house? Well, I love the finished basement. All right, well, there might not be a permit for this, but it's been like this for 20 years. The home inspector took a look at it, lifted up the ceiling tiles, looked behind it. He said it looks pretty good. If we go and open this can of worms, the town's going to reassess. They're going to close these permits out. They're going to reassess, and your property taxes are going to go up forever. So do you really want to open up that can of worms? I'm your agent. So my advice is, yeah, open it up because I don't want to be on the hook when you go and sell this in the future, right? But that's just, that's a thought behind permits. A lot of times it's going to increase you're going to reassess and increase your property taxes. Building permits, plumbing, electrical, when you're doing rehabs. Yeah.
I see a lot of houses that are in the same neighborhood even where it's like one house is $4,000 a year and another one is $7,000.
Yes.
And I don't understand why.
A lot of times it's because of that. It's at some point that house it got assessed differently. They put a sunroom on a porch, finished the basement, did something major to that house, and the assessor came out and put a new value on it. So, all right, quality and assurability of title. Seller agrees to give clear title by default. I'll just skip down to tenancies, not applicable. Lead-based paint. I don't really feel like I have a need to get into that, so I'm not going to. So, POET system. I asked this at every class and nobody can give me an answer. What the hell is a POET system? Point of entry treatment. So I don't know what one is. I've never seen one. So until I do, I don't sell a ton in. I do more now. I'm helping agents with it in like more rural areas. I imagine that's where that might come up. But in towns like, Moorestown and anywhere in Camden County, you're public water and sewer. And I don't know what a POET system is. So maybe Christine can chime in if she's still on here.
It usually goes down to the app.
It goes what?
filters off to the side.
Like a water softener or something?
It's a filter. Like,
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay.
So this is, so like for say in Cinnaminson, there's
Yeah.
a Superfund site. Do you remember, you might be too young, we used to have to put with like what the list of Superfund sites with every contract. And they were all over the state of New Jersey. That was, I guess you're too young, sorry.
Well,
So we used to have to put, it was literally a list from the state of New Jersey Superfund sites.
super.
And so let's say in Cinnaminson on between Union Landing and Taylor's Lane, are you familiar? There's like there used to be a dump there.
Yeah.
So now it's in the process of being cleaned up and they have vents and it's like a 30-year cleanup, literally.
Gotcha.
So that would be like a POET system. So back in the day when that site was active and like sewer and dump,
Right.
it would run into the water. And I'm sure you've heard, I mean, you probably didn't realize it was this close in Cinnaminson, but of like the movies with Aaron Brockovich and like where it goes into the well water.
Right.
That's a POET. It runs from the Superfund site into the water.
Well, let me ask you this question. Is this something that you're seeing on being?
No.
Okay.
Don't
I
worry.
just wanted to make sure because then I would be like, well, probably.
No, I wouldn't worry about it. We don't even put the Superfund sites list anymore with the contracts.
Okay. All right. Cool. Interesting. Did not know that. All right. So cesspools, same thing, right? I dealt with this on Lanola Road in Morristown, South Lanola. So they do exist sometimes. So this is another thing, like Amy said, to make sure you're, if we're filling out the contract as a buyer's agent and you don't know for sure and you say it's not applicable and there's no cesspool at the property, and then 10 years from now they do a GPR scan or whatever and they see that, oh, there's this huge massive cesspool, tell them to call Joe Ryan.
The poets are more Atlantic County.
Atlantic? Okay. Interesting. Okay. All right. So arguably the most important part of the contract, the inspection contingency period. I feel like we talk about this so much that I don't even really need to get into it too much. I don't know. It's just every single deal we're waiving them. We're offering to only ask for repairs that are over a certain cumulative amount. I will definitely go into it, but it's just there's so much to talk about. We could have a couple-hour class just talking about inspections, especially in this market because it's addressed on almost every single deal. So what I like to talk about with this is the things that I see with offers coming in, right, that I cannot stand. This sentence, buyer agrees to purchase property as is, period. That is an awful sentence. Don't put that on a contract. That means nothing. As a matter of fact, I think it's in this sentence, wait. 346, so you know what I'm looking for? Buyer acknowledges the property is being sold in as-is condition. It's already in the contract. So don't just put that sentence in there. It doesn't mean anything. What would mean something is buyer will have a home inspection, and if they won't ask the seller for results or for any repairs, but they have the right to terminate if they're unsatisfied with the results. That was a layman's terms. There's obviously, I have really good language for that from different deals that I'll share. I actually don't have it in this. I should bring it up. I showed it for the last contract class. Or buyer specifically waives section 16 of the contract. They've done their due diligence and they waive all right to inspections regarding general home, termite, radon, and any other inspection outlined in section 16 of the agreement of sale. Because if you just have that sentence as is, it doesn't mean anything, but to a seller, it does. To a seller, it's going to mean they can't ask me for repairs. And if they do, they're in breach of contract. So you need to be careful with that. And they agreed to sign an inspection waiver. Yeah, so they're going to catch you for that. If you have a buyer, if you are running any buyers right now that are waiving their home inspection entirely, you need to make sure they have signed the waiver, which is in DocuSign, or they'll catch you for that on compliance. Even in this market, I don't think it's a good idea. I think the best way that we can handle this market and inspections is to put a limit on it. Buyers will only ask for repairs if the cumulative value of those repairs as defined by a licensed contractor is greater than X amount, like 5,000. I've seen attorneys put that into contracts. I've seen that language. I think that works the best because that's very clear. The buyer wants to, BS with little nitpicky things. They can't, right? They're not going to get a contractor to quote them 5,000 because an outlet is crooked or because the carpet is dirty, right? But they will get a contractor to quote them for 7,000 if the HVAC unit is dead or if the roof is needs to be replaced or whatever, right? And then you can negotiate anything above the $5,000. So a lot of sellers are fine with that. And in my opinion, they should be. If a seller sees, hey, the buyer's not going to ask for repairs under $5,000, then they go, no. What are they hiding? What do they know that's wrong with their house that they didn't disclose that they know is going to probably be more than $5,000? That's my thought on it. So same, radon. I'm not going to really get into that. Actually, I guess maybe we can touch on it real quick. So radon is a naturally occurring gas, right? I am not a radon expert. I'm also not an attorney. So radon is the leading cause of lung cancer other than smoking, right? So what it is it's a naturally occurring gas. We're breathing it in right now, probably like extremely minimally, but it comes from underneath the Earth's crust or whatever. And the most common area that you'll find it is in basements, homes with basements or crawl spaces. So I recommend every buyer get a radon test when they purchase a home with a basement or a crawl space. And they do get them on slab properties as well, but I've never seen them come in like even close to 1.0 on a property with a slab, but peace of mind. It's about $100. When you have your home inspection, the inspector will leave a little canister in the basement. And in the state of New Jersey, the only person that the home inspector cannot read the results. So a couple days later, after the canister's been sitting there, the home inspector has to come, package it up, and mail it off to a certified testing lab. In most other states, the inspector can read it on the spot, but whatever. So when they send it off to the testing lab, they read the results, and if they come in above a certain threshold, you're supposed to have the seller, by contract, standard contract language, is obligated to remediate and retest prior to closing. This is one of those things like lead-based paint that terrifies buyers, but is a perfectly correctable issue. I've seen radon numbers come in the 50s, and they put one system in and it goes back down to almost zero. So what the system is to cure radon, to fix radon, is they either go to the sump pump, or if there's not one, they just dig a hole in the ground and they stick a plastic tube into the hole and they go straight out the side of the house or out the roof. They put a little fan in it, and the fan just runs forever and blows the air from the basement out the top of the house away from the people living in it, and that lowers the results. The last one that I did was in Haddon Heights. It was $1,300. So $1,300, it took the radon down from 6.0 to 2.0. Sellers were very unhappy, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, we're in the basement, yeah. Almost all home inspectors will just do it on the spot. So if you forget, most of them just like have them in their car. Some home inspectors don't do radon and termite, and they'll subcontract somebody else to come in and do that. But most standard home inspectors will do all three at once: termite, radon, home inspection. What they will not do is lead-based paint. What they will not do is a swimming pool inspection. What they will not do is a fireplace inspection. These a little bit more involved inspections. What they will do is say, hey, you know what, most home inspectors will say, this fireplace, you need to have a fireplace inspection here. Just like they say with everything, they're generalists, just like we are. This looks like it needs to service. Have them come out and service. Have the HVAC come out. The roof looks like it's missing a couple shingles. Have a roofing company come and evaluate, right? So same thing with those other issues. So termite typically it's $75. Another thing that I'd love an explanation for that I've never got is why VA makes the seller pay for it. It's a $75 inspection. It is not a big deal, but VA must see that the seller has paid for it, not the buyer. I don't know. There's had to have been a lawsuit or something for that. So get a termite inspection. You get a single a form called a WDI, wood destroying insects report. FHA and VA lenders love to see that it came in clean. If it didn't, generally not a massive issue always. Have it treated, have it remediated, and you'll get another inspection and they'll provide a clean WDI. And here's the other thing I'll just harp on real quick. So I think that a lot of times we lump home inspection, radon, and termite inspections together as just the inspection. It's actually not the case. The case is standard contract language is that the seller is required to pay for damage up to 1% of the sales price. And we often overlook that and we'll include it just as a line item in with our home inspection repairs when we shouldn't be doing that. It's not a negotiation. The seller is obligated to do it per the contract. Same thing with radon. So another thing that happens all the time, buyers say, hey, it's fine. I can back out during my home inspection period, right? I can just cancel during my home inspection period, right? Wrong. You must send over a list of repairs to the seller. The seller must then say no. Now at this point, the buyer has a right to terminate the contract and get their deposit back. The buyer cannot just say, I'm unhappy with the results, I cancel. You can't do that. You have to ask for repairs. So is there a case where a buyer won't be able to back out? Not really, because the buyer could ask for all 50 pages of stuff to be done. I want a new roof, I want a new electrical system, I want blah, 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 blah. And the seller is just going to say no, and the deal is going to be terminated. So I got myself into trouble with this one time, and I'll admit it, it was one time that I thought I was done. I thought this was the end of my real estate career. Looking back, it wasn't really a big deal, but it cost me money and it was an experience for me. I had a deal that was as is. I told my buyer, don't offer on this house. You're going to be unsatisfied with the inspection results and you're going to want to terminate. It was an old house in Morristown. And what do you think he did? Make the offer on it. So I make the offer, I get him the house, and I don't remember what the language was, but there were no attorneys involved. It just said property's being sold in as-is condition. So we have our home inspection. And the buyer says, you guessed it, I want out. This is too much going on. It's too old, this and that. And so I called the listing agent. She was really nice. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know, inspection didn't go great. Buyer's going to want to terminate. And I shouldn't have said that. I said that because I felt like the other agent was friendly and it was like me calling Amy or any one of you in here. And I felt like we had a little bit of a rapport and I was just trying to be nice to her and give her a heads up so that she could tell the sellers. Well, she said, no, you know what, that's no problem. I said, and I said to her, I need to get a little repair request list over to you, whatever. She's like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Let's just get this thing back on the market. It's fine. Just send over termination. So I go in and I go in dot loop at the time. I have my buyer sign a termination. I send it over and I don't hear anything for a couple of days. Now she's not answering my calls. Didn't send an inspection repair request over. And sure enough, her husband's an attorney and they're friends with the sellers. And her husband sends a letter to our office basically threatening to go after the buyer because he didn't send over, it was being sold in as-is condition, right? So I screwed up. I should have sent over, I should have made him do a repair list and I should have just sent over. And ever since, from that point forward, that was the click in my brain, like this is not a game. This is serious. Read the contract. Don't be best friends on the phone, but get your S in writing and get it over to them to CYA. That was my biggest lesson in this business on that. Ultimately, what happened was he had $5,000 in escrow and he had to give up half of that and I paid for it. I paid for the $2,500 that it was, yeah. So that was a $2,500 lesson, but to be honest, it could have been a lot more. That will segue into what happens if a buyer is in breach of contract. A lot of people think that they're on the hook for their escrow. They're on the hook for their $1,000 deposit. Is that the case in New Jersey? No. The buyer can be on the hook for a lot more than their escrow. As a matter of fact, if the buyer breaches contract, like what happened in my case, right? And the seller wants to go after them, they can resell the property to somebody else. If they get $10,000 less, they can sue the buyer for the $10,000 difference. They can sue the buyer for the additional holding costs. They can sue the buyer for the storage costs. They can go after the buyer for a lot more than that $1,000, $3,000, or $5,000 escrow. All the days that it's been on market, yeah, yep.
Would that have to be like, because can't you not sell it if there's litigation?
You can, so yeah, because actually a section in this contract that I think we skipped over, the equitable lien, the contract is basically, it's one of these, I don't know. Maybe we didn't get there yet. I just was going over this today. No, they can, but they can relist. I've always been told you can relist while you're negotiating the escrow.
I don't know about that.
What would you say?
I'm not going to say because I'm not an attorney.
Well, I'm not an attorney either, and I'm up here teaching this class.
I think ask Christine. Christine will tell us.
I'm waiting for her to hear us.
I feel like that was a question on like.
I'm listening.
So Marty, it's actually my mentor, Marty Hill, who's a broker, yeah, Christine, go ahead. You hear us, what our question is?
I did hear you, but I was actually typing something. I was gonna say FYI, deposit can't be released until both parties agree, no matter what. Who
Right,
cares?
yes, deposit can't be released until both parties agree, no matter what, yes.
Or a judge says so.
Can they put it back on the market? Yeah.
So that's a gray area, and I've asked numerous attorneys that question. Ultimately, the answer is yes, because the deposit can't be released. Like, even, they can disagree on no matter what, but it's up to the judge. Like the judge has to have the final say and someone has to take it to court in order to get that money.
She said gray area. Ultimately, yes, the seller can put the property back on the market while the deposit's in dispute.
Because we could hold it forever.
Because they can hold it forever. Yeah.
Could you add sent back to your scenario, I was thinking about it, like a mutual sort of termination agreement where there was no sort of, nothing could happen after the fact?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I had in that deal where I got myself in trouble, what the document that I was sending over had the seller signed it. It was a termination and escrow release. So it would have released all parties from each other and would have given the deposit back to the buyer. And that's typically what would happen when you get to that point. But Christine is 100% right. And I didn't say this. In the state of New Jersey, escrow will never automatically be released. George Denny has his own opinions on escrows, and depending on how much it is, you can have $1,000 escrow sitting in an account for 30 years because it's not going to be released until both people sign off on it. That's the biggest risk you have for a buyer putting a large deposit in escrow, is it's not going to be automatically released. Now, if they need to go find another house and they've got $10,000 sitting in escrow, now they need enough, they needed that money for their closing costs. Well, until the seller and the buyer both agree and sign off on a release on who that money is going to go to, nobody should be releasing that money from escrow. What else? Okay, so one thing a lot of people ask or comes up sometimes is my uncle's a contractor. He's going to do my home inspection. That's great. He's welcome to come, but you need a licensed home inspector to provide a report to be asking for repairs.
And probably the mortgage company, when they want to.
Well, the mortgage company doesn't care about inspection at all, and they will not, appraisal, right.
And don't tell the mortgage company about any inspections.
Don't tell the mortgage, when you have a home inspection, I don't think anybody would do this, but don't ever send the home inspection report to the lender. Don't send them your repair request list, and put your repairs, when you agree to them, put them on a separate addendum and don't send it to the lender.
I have a question. So if you get a price decrease due to inspection reasons, let's say, that you just put in a separate addendum, you don't need to state why or anything like that?
Correct. Price is reduced from A to B. That's it. You wouldn't say because of inspections.
There's not a separate line on the inspection addendum to drop the price?
There is no inspection addendum. In most other states there are. There is not in New Jersey. So I will get into that real quick. So the reason why our documents are weird in New Jersey, what I've been taught, is because North Jersey goes by New York law. And in New York, every deal you have an attorney. I guess it's a state law. You need to have an attorney on a real estate transaction. So North Jersey kind of follows what New York does. South Jersey kind of follows what Philly does. And in PA, there are never, ever, ever, ever attorneys on deal. Very, very rarely do you see an attorney involved on a residential real estate transaction in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania's documents are way more clear cut. As a matter of fact, there's a line in the Pennsylvania contract of sale that says this entire agreement is limited to what's in escrow. And you can check it off. And you wouldn't be able to go after the buyer for more than what's in escrow. I'd love to have that be a part. And a lot of attorneys, when you have attorneys involved in deals in New Jersey, they put that in as one of their provisions. This deal is limited to what we have in escrow. Can't go after the buyer for more than what that, right? So the reason why we have attorney review, at least what I've been taught, is because North Jersey goes by North Jersey, they're used every deal. South Jersey, they're not used that often. So the middle ground is let's have this period where either party can hire an attorney if they see fit. And the reason why this contract leaves a little bit of room for interpretation, a word which we're not supposed to be doing since we are not attorneys, is because it's created by attorneys in North Jersey who in the back of their minds know that attorneys are used on every deal. So if you're using attorneys on every deal, these attorneys go back and forth, all that they know they can interpret how they see fit, and it works a little bit differently. So that's why I like the PA documents, because they treat it like we're a bunch of 5-year-olds, which we are. And I think that the contract is a much more clear cut in PA. Disclosure. So I don't know if I'm skipping over anything that you feel, Christine, that I should be talking about. Definitely let me know. It's 1:58 now. I'm supposed to get on a 2, but I don't want to end early. So no assignment, I'm going to talk about quickly again, because this is something that's happening in this hot market. So if you know what a real estate wholesaler is, it's somebody who goes out and knocks on an old, I'm going to stereotype here knocks on somebody who can be taken advantage of, like an older person, because my grandmother is one of these people. Knocks on the door knowing that there's an old person living there and convinces them to sign a contract to sell their house to them for $100,000, then turns around and calls 10 real estate investors and tries to sell them that contract for $120,000 and then nets the difference. That's an assignment of contract. You take this contract for $100,000 and you sell the contract to somebody else for $120,000, and then you're going to net the difference. The wholesaler is going to net the difference. In my opinion, that's what you would call a net listing. That's what the state of New Jersey, that's what a judge would say, that's you're not giving the seller a fiduciary, and as licensees, we should not be doing that. If you don't have your license, it's perfectly legal in the state of New Jersey to be a wholesaler. And the reason I bring this up is because they added a paragraph to the contract of sale that says you cannot assign this contract. So you cannot do that with this contract. You would have to amend the language in here to be able to assign this contract to another buyer. The only time that this happens, you know, you'll see people do weird things with properties that are distressed. So just got to be careful. No, but you could cross it out because I mean, at least you can try. I've seen that happen. So
You see that like a family, like parent to a child.
I typically see it's somebody in a bad spot. Somebody in a bad spot who believes the person that they're talking to. What I tell my sellers is, because I've done a lot of distress sales and a lot of estate sales, they always say, I get these letters in the mail. I called this guy and he came out and he told me, oh, you're gonna have to have a home inspection and you're gonna pay realtor commissions and you're gonna pay this and that. And I say, listen, that is all true. You're gonna have to do all that, but you're gonna get $150,000. Is it worth it for that? Yes, in every case it is. As your agent, you don't need to be home for showings. I can schedule them all for you. I can handle everything and only come to you when I have an offer. How does that sound? Yes. And the other thing that I say is those people that have those signs up, we buy houses, and are trying to get you to call them because you're in a bad spot, they're also looking on the MLS. They're also looking at properties that are listed. They're not just taking the calls on the sign. So that 6% is nothing when you're looking at trying to sell it off market to, you know, a wholesaler or somebody trying to buy it off market. So more power to you. I know a lot of those people that go out there and they're looking for off market deals all the time, but it doesn't make sense for everybody. Very rarely does it actually make sense to not list your property at all, even just on the internet, let alone with an agent. So.
They can only do these rotations for homes that aren't listed.
Yep.
For sale by owners or just not
Yeah.
even listed yet.
Right, not even listed yet. Yeah, going down the probate list, going through vacant owners, that kind of thing, trying to get a deal in a market where there are no deals. So that's it. I ran through the whole contract there, just about an hour. Any questions? Anything? Anybody feel like, Christine, anything else you think I should harp on or that I missed?
No, I kind of was paying attention. I was also working, but nice work. Thanks.
So what you're saying is I did a great job. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, you did.
All right, I'm done. Bye. I'm going to end this Zoom now. I'll have the link later if anybody wants it.